Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Riggs Eckelberry of OriginClear. Riggs, it's awesome having you on the show.
Such a pleasure, Gresham. Thank you.
Definitely, pleasure's all ours. And before we jumped in, I'll read a little bit more about Riggs so you can hear about all the awesome things that he's doing. And Riggs is the founder and CEO of the innovative water technology company OriginClear, which is delivering water solutions for industrial customers worldwide. With operations in Texas, Virginia, and China, OriginClear has developed and licensed an invention that treats industrial and agricultural wastewater with very little energy and no chemicals. And now industrial users can treat their water right where they use it using prepackaged point of use water treatment systems that have an amazing life cycle of up to 100 years or more. Riggs, are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
Let's rock.
Awesome. Let's rock and roll. So to kind of kick everything off, I wanted to rewind the clock a little bit, hear a little bit more on how you got started. Could you take us through your CEO story? We'll let you get started with all the awesome work you're doing.
Thank you, Gresham. Well, I actually came out of tech. I was, in the .com, accustomed to these, start a company. 4 months later, wow, you got sold, and
Right.
Which was good and bad because you're busy building something, and all of a sudden, like, I guess I'm not. Okay, I'll take some money, but what about this cool thing I was building?
Right.
But after 2000, things got a bit better. We were able to get a bit, it reminds me a lot of what's happening with crypto now because, the whole 2018 now better. But back then in .com, we had a similar thing where, for me, I got to do really exciting work in the first decade of the 2000s. And I was key to taking a company onto the NASDAQ in the security space. And then I made the thing you should never do, which is I told a fund that I thought I could be a good CEO, and they agreed. And that was not brilliant. I've had ample cause to regret that. But seriously, in 2007, we launched a company. Now, their thing was like, look, technology is great, but we want to get going with green and, save the world and so forth. And we realized that we had an opportunity with this material called algae to create biofuel. And so we created a company called Origin Oil because algae was the original oil. Mm-hmm. And we were on a mission to literally, switch from fossil fuels to making petroleum in real time, right? Which is incredibly virtuous, and you wouldn't have to change cars really and all that good stuff. So really exciting. Unfortunately, the oil industry came up with fracking, which turned algae into a science experiment overnight, really. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we had to a lot of companies shut down in the space that were, real high flyers. We pivoted by taking what we were using to harvest algae to then remove waste from water and literally remove the microscopic particles from water as opposed to good stuff. It was bad stuff. We started in the oil industry. Then it continued to have a hard time. I think the oil industry is just on this continuous rolling downhill kind of mode where it's hard to put new technologies in because they're constantly shutting down wells or having some kind of disaster. Fine. We then widened out to water treatment in general. And then we learned a very important lesson, which is the water industry does not like new technology. It takes 12 to 15 years to get new technology adopted. Obviously, reasons like public health and, they're trying to do the right thing, but they're hyper conservative. So it's like before Uber trying to convince the taxi industry to accept a credit card.
Right.
It's like, why? Cash is great, right?
Exactly.
So we then started, okay, let's start really trying to move the needle and change that about the water industry. Let's try to disrupt the water industry. We bought a company in Texas. We still have it. Fantastic company that builds amazing stuff. We brought in this technology for modular water systems so that you can just truck a system on site, plug it in, and it goes to work. That's great. And all this leads to the big trend in water, which is like all other industries, decentralization. We have this amazing trend of, because water infrastructure is falling apart, the cities are, you've heard about Flint. Well, there's a lot more nightmares you haven't heard about. South Bend, Indiana is far worse than Flint, but nobody talks about it.
Mm.
Because I guess they had refrigerator factories back in the day. So all these, Superfund problems are creating water problems. And on top of it, the federal government's not paying for infrastructure, vicious cycle. And what's the resulting is that industries are having to do their own water treatment more and more.
Mm.
And that requires a whole new way, because then at least you realize, wait a minute, these businesses, if you're a brewery and you have to do your own water treatment now because you got stuck with it, well, that wasn't on your capital plan. You were not going to spend $2 million on a water treatment system. You were going to spend it on better beer.
Mm.
And that's finally in the COVID year what we tackled, but getting ahead of myself. That's my background.
No, I definitely appreciate you for drilling down on that, because I think and obviously pivoting as well too, because I think so many times there's different opportunities when you have that ability to kind of see that and see the technology and marry those two things into that solution. But it sounds like almost, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, it kind of sounds like you're partnering with these organizations, these businesses, breweries, for example, that maybe didn't have to solve a problem initially when they started, but now they have to do that and not sure how exactly to make that happen.
Right. So this is where in 2019, we were like, hey, okay, we got the technology and let's help you. And we just learned that we had and still have a huge backlog of business that takes forever to turn into projects. And that's why the water industry is so slow to grow. It's because these are major capital projects, and so they take a long time. When COVID hit, literally a year ago, it was just before my birthday, first days of February, we watched the price of oil crash because Wuhan went down for a month. First week of February. The rest of America was like, huh, what? But the oil industry reacted to the sudden loss of demand. And we woke up here at OriginClear and went, wait a minute, there's a problem. And I like to say that COVID caused everything chronic to become acute. If you had a chronic problem before, it became like Neiman Marcus was going to close eventually. Dead Man Walking. Well, it closed. Barney's closed. All these things, right? Anything that was in trouble broke down. And we realized that we had to solve the problem of funding self-treatment, localized treatment, which is replacing centralized treatment because America's not funding anything anymore except throwing money around, I guess. And so we worked on this frantically for months. The CEO of Airbnb said something very interesting last year. He said, in 10 weeks, we did 10 years worth of work, right? And they succeeded. They had a great IPO, and you would have thought they would have fallen apart, but they didn't. Amazing, amazing story. And I think there'll have to be a book about it. I think it's one of those cool stories. Well, we had a similar story in that we eventually realized, wait a minute, it's the funding, stupid. If you can fund these systems and just sign here, Mr. Brewery, and you'll just pay on the meter like you always do. And they go, okay. Number one. Number two, because we have roll in, roll out systems, we can always take them back if the guy stops paying. Which means we don't have to demand a 15-year contract with stellar credit and your personal guarantee, and we want your mansion in Palm Beach. No, we'll just rent you this system the same way that someone might rent a TV. And that is the revolution. And the final piece of the puzzle came in place literally over the last month or two, which is we found a group of investors that is really, 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 really trying to reinvent itself, and that's real estate investors. Real estate investors used to be that your entire life could be a real estate portfolio and you were fine. That's not true anymore. You need to be diversified. There's good real estate, bad real estate, but there's no longer just great real estate, right? And so real estate investors are trying to diversify, and there's a new asset class called water, and we can bring them in and they will help fund these systems for these service contracts that are called water as a service. And it's turning into a beautiful thing. And literally my team is going flat out to bring in these investors, convert their assets into money, because that's what we need to build these systems, and then direct them. And very, very shortly, Gresham, the capability of my Texas company will be overloaded. And I'll have to start asking other water companies to please build stuff for us because we've solved this money problem.
Awesome. No, I definitely appreciate you for sharing that and breaking that down, because I think so many times in businesses and organizations, sometimes we can get so focused on the thing we're doing rather than the true problem that we're actually solving, and you being able to kind of recognize that for the organization itself, but even seeing how another similar industry, but maybe not exactly the same, can also benefit from that, is really how you get those kind of win-win scenarios, and you truly make an impact, obviously in one industry, but in so many more, and create that true ripple effect, it sounds like.
Yes, Gresham, it's very interesting because I believe that you can adapt your way to success, right?
Hmm.
I had a business failure in the 80s where I landed. I'd been in the nonprofit space and I'd had a whole career at sea. It was a whole other story. Reinvented myself in New York in the 80s, landed there like, okay, I believe in technology. I want to do technology. Launched a company like, woohoo. Um, and essentially gave up. And did not fail, gave up. And what I realized from that is, and it took me a long time to then recover personally. And I realized that it's it's easier to solve life than to kill yourself.
Mm,
Similar concept, right? Um,
right.
and so if you're in this intractable situation, invent your way out. Find people who are willing to help you figure it out. It's going to be easier than just going, you know what? And at the time, I gave my business what I built. I gave it to my best salesman, and he's become a millionaire off of it. There was no reason why I had to give it up. And so that's where I learned this utter persistence. But you've got to reinvent. Persistence is great, but persisting on the wrong channel. I mean, when I was a ship captain, I knew that if I went on the wrong course for long enough, I would then have to come back from that wrong course. So persisting on a wrong course gets you deeper and deeper. That's not good either.
Yeah.
So fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it. And people have, criticized me for, like Mozart, too many notes, right? But you have to be like, fix, 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 fix. And then a lot of people get behind you because they realize you are trying to make it work. The water industry, it is said, we will run out of water in less than 20 years. By 2040, there will be major, major, major problems in the world with water availability. The water industry is very complacent. So there's this big gap between the big, big problem coming down the road. If you go to the world counts, there's a counter that counts down the years and then down to the second. And but meanwhile, the water industry is like, we got this. It's all good. We're treating the water. Everything's great. The gap is where I'm trying to come up with these novel solutions. Another novel solution that we're working on is desalination. Right now, desalination is not logical. We should recycle water. We should do better wastewater treatment. We should do all kinds of things. But there's 97.5% of the world's water is salt water. And 40% of the world's population lives within 100 kilometers of coastlines. Therefore, desalination is super, super energy intensive, fossil fuel process, very expensive, blah, blah, blah. We're now doing a project. We're about to recruit a university, and you're actually the first to hear this. This is the first time I've discussed this publicly.
Nice.
We're about to launch a skunkworks project to do something about the next generation of desal, because the technology is already in universities to do this wide availability of cheap, sustainable desalination. We want to use our platform as a public company to bring this up and roll it out the same way we're doing it with decentralized water treatment.
Nice. Well, I definitely appreciate you for sharing that with us. And I think so many times, as you said so well, it's not just about pivoting, but or it's not just about having that persistence, but it's also about pivoting and understand that, hey, I'm trying to break through the window, but there's a door right over here that everybody's walking through, and that might be a potential opportunity. And so I wanted to ask you for what I call your secret sauce. And this could be for you personally or the business, or a combination of both. Do you feel it's that ability to continue to kind of innovate, that sets you apart and makes you or your organization unique?
The key, I think, is to be in a place where you yourself, like your own best resources is you at the end of the day. And you have to make sure that you're in a place where you don't feel horrible about what's happening, or let's say some somebody's taking advantage of you financially, whatever's going on, and you can't just go, oh my God, and so the end of the world, and I'm to blame and I'm no good, right? Well, sure, we all got to improve ourselves, but at the end of the day, we are our own best resource. And so keeping that, and I did a lot of early studies with, you know, in fact, I'm one of the, despite my advanced age, I spent a lot of time as a young man learning at the feet of a philosopher named L. Ron Hubbard. And very few people are around who actually had that personal experience. Well, what I came away from with that, because I saw him deal with extraordinary challenges, is that you yourself remain peaceful. You yourself remain untroubled and go crazy, deal with the problems, solve them, fix them, do whatever you got to do. But you yourself remain an oasis of peace in a way that people can then go, oh, Riggs isn't too worried. I guess it's going to be okay.
Yeah, and that's extremely powerful because I think so many times we don't realize the impact that we have by I guess the feeling that we have, or kind of even from a leadership standpoint, what we're giving off. If you show yourself as worried, then everybody else becomes worried. But if you show yourself as calm and being able to kind of not die as we talked about, but continue to kind of innovate and find a way, then people can get behind that and you become an even stronger leader.
Right. And of course, it also helps to be competent, right? In other words,
True.
it helps for the ship not to hit the rocks. So that's good
Yes.
too.
Yeah. So you want to make sure that you know that you're even on a ship and you know what a ship does as well. That's always extremely important. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit and I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be like an app, a book, or a habit that you have, but what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
All right. Well, the number one thing I believe is that we have a very complex world today. Know what you don't know, right?
Mm.
I can hack together an MOU, memorandum of understanding, and kind of throw it out there. But before I do something that's really, really going to commit the company, I'd better get some help. And but the key is, who do I select to help me, right? I can select. I've got a law firm that's extremely conservative, and they do wonderful things for me with. They make sure that I don't get in trouble with the SEC. That's great, but they're not going to reinvent stuff for me. That's a different law firm, and so know who to choose to solve your problem, because you're number one. I know my limits. I did not go to law school. In fact, I didn't even go to college. I got trained as a ship captain, totally different set of skills. And so here I am dealing with a legal matter. Excuse me, I'd better get some good help. And that's where I'll go and recruit really, really great people. Right now, for example, this whole asset class thing where we're trying to get real estate portfolios converted into a fund for water systems, I'm actively recruiting for somebody who can actually do those deals, because I'll end up spending night and day doing it and not even do it right. I know that. So call on people to help, and also learn learn about people, get a sense of. And here's my feeling. You and I already know, when we start dealing with somebody, we pretty much know quickly, are they going to be a waste of time or not? And as they like to say in the drug rehab space, denial is not a river in Africa, right? Mm-hmm. So don't be in denial like, oh, maybe this person will work out. Maybe they'll be fine. No, this person is either good for the job or is not. And the sooner you decide and choose, the better off you'll be. So that's where it's at. Get help, get the right help, and don't be afraid to consult your own common sense about these resources.
Yeah, that's absolutely huge. And trust that common sense. And of course, as you said so well, too, know thyself, because I think if we understand where our competency is, we get to have those partners or people or organizations, whatever that might be, to complement so that we can ultimately, reach that goal. So I absolutely love that hack. And so I wanted to ask you now for what I call a CEO nugget. So this could be more of a word of wisdom or piece of advice. You might have already touched on this. It might be something, if you were to hop into a time machine, you would tell your younger business self.
Well, I used to tell myself, Riggs, it would have been nice if you had apprenticed and paid some dues in the industry that you jumped into. But in fact, more recently, I've realized that our wealth of information is so good that I can, and there's so many people already specialized, right? That I think what I think is good is to yourself become a good generalist, because those are rare. Lots of people are deep divers, and that's really good. And they'll call me up and they'll go, okay, we got this thing going on, and they're like in their little silo, and I go, well, why don't we do this thing? They go, oh, that makes sense. Well, that's because I try to be a generalist, and I try to keep that high level view. It's a challenge because at the same time, you and I have to do real work. We have to sit down and have to grind away at a stupid contract or whatever. But the more generalist viewpoint you can get, the more you can think, okay, my company can do well. Will this do a good thing for the industry I'm in? And will this have good long-term effects, or will I just be ripping people off? Well, these are important concerns, and you can only have them by having that high-level view. Don't be too worried about not being a specialist. You can buy that if you're a good generalist.
I absolutely love that. And I think, and I don't know if you would speak to, you feel the same way too, especially like how less siloed I think the world is, and how many impacts that are overlapping and different decisions that are made, or as you talked about, different industries that are overlapping as well too. It's so important to be able to kind of see the forest for the trees, to be able to see more than just that one thing that a lot of times those specialists will focus on.
Yes, and it's a strength of America, really. I sent my son, who's now 23, but at the time we sent him to a private school in LA, a day school, and this school was getting a huge amount of demand from Chinese and Korean parents who wanted to teach their kids a more American view than what they were getting, a very structured system in the Chinese and Korean school system, which is very much about repetition and rote and so forth, right? And it creates brilliant people, but they wanted these people to think outside the box, and they sent people to America to get that. So that is what we treasure. We need to keep that. That is our strength.
Yeah, that's all. That speaks to that creativity and that innovation that you brought about as well, being able to kind of see a different way. And so, I wanted to ask you now my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. We're open to have different quote unquote CEOs on the show. So, Riggs, what does being a CEO mean to
In one word, masochism.
you?
Because you can make money with money. I mean, just if you were smart enough to get Bitcoin 10 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? So, so yeah, being an operator, as we call it, is a tough and demanding job, and you're kind of like, you're the center of attention, good or bad, and you could get in real trouble, no question about it. And a lot of people depend on you. But having said that, it's a lot like when I was a ship captain, and I could have ended up, at the bottom of the ocean many, many times. I think you got to like it. So if some people are just, if I'm talking through you, Gresham, to people who may be a CEO one day, we need more CEOs. At the peak of the .com, there was something like 185 Silicon Valley companies that needed a CEO. It's hard to find. And you got to be cheerleader, fundraiser, ethicist, right? Can't forget that. And also, commercializer and all these wonderful things. And it's going to be done relentlessly. You'll have zero time and you'll be totally overloaded. So try it out. And at the same time, a CEO will die if he does not go ahead and tap all of the specialists available to him and not have it all just come ramming in on him. So that's the key. Be willing to be that horrible masochistic thing that the world needs, I think, but then also make it more occupiable by bringing in people to help. And that way, I think it can be a lot of fun. And then eventually you get to graduate, make a lot of money, and then you get to lecture and tell people how wonderful you were and, manage funds and sort of go, one day go to Tahiti when we can travel again. But I believe that I'm going to be operating companies for as long as I can. I love it. I really do.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Don't forget writing the book too, because that's very important as well. You got to have a book and maybe a movie too. Those are all the important things. But it's so funny because it brought me to this. I think Elon Musk, and I might butcher it. He has a quote about startup in general, but he says running a startup's kind of like chewing on glass and staring into the abyss. And I think so many times, like when you start to think about it, as you said so well, it really starts to quantify or put into words like the challenges, the ups and downs of running it, and the different hats and the different people you have to understand and be able to learn from, but also the great opportunity from that great challenge that can come about if you're able to do it and do it well, and the impact, of course, that you have. So definitely appreciate that definition, Riggs.
Thank you, Gresham. I love these interviews because I realize things as I go, and that's super cool.
Yeah, it's a really great exercise. So definitely appreciate that. And I appreciate your time even more. What I wanted to do is just pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional you can let us know. And of course, how best people can get a hold of you and find out about all the awesome things you and your team are working on.
Thank you. Well, I like to say we're the most transparent public company in America because every week on a Thursday night, 5 p.m., Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, every Thursday night, we have a half hour where I brief everyone on what's happening in the company, everything we're doing as much as possible that I'm permitted to say, and also I try and communicate directly to right now it's about 31,000 people sign up on my website for that newsletter. And when you receive my newsletter, if you hit reply, it's coming into my inbox. I love to hear from people, and I would love to hear from your listeners.
Awesome. And to make it even easier, we'll have the links and information in the show notes just to get a hold of you and to find out about that newsletter as well too. So Riggs, truly appreciate you again, my friend, and I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
Gresham, thank you for your work, and appreciate the opportunity.